G'day, my fellow media collectors. I'm Troy, and this is the Comic Book Movie Collector's Guide. And today, we're looking at... Aquaman is an animated superhero cartoon that was produced by Filmation and aired on Saturday mornings on the CBS Network from the 9th of September 1967 through to the 2nd of September 1968. The Aquaman cartoon was part of the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure. This 60-minute program included a series of 6-minute adventures that also featured various other DC Comics superheroes. This series marked the animation debut of nearly all of its featured characters and teams, with the exception of Superman, Superboy, and their supporting cast. This DVD has all 38 episodes with a runtime of 6 minutes each. This was first released on DVD on the 23rd of October 2007. And it was distributed by Warner Home Video. The cartoon series follows the heroic exploits of Aquaman, the King of the Seven Seas, and his teenage sidekick, Aqualad. Together they defend the underwater world from threats like Black Manta, sea monsters, and rogue alien invaders, using Aquaman's telepathic control over marine life and their courage, with the occasional assistance of Mera and their loyal seahorses, Storm and Imp. The duo embarks on action-packed adventures to protect the oceans and its inhabitants. The scripts for these episodes embrace the same no-nonsense structure that was present in the Adventures of Superman cartoon, with a clear setup, conflict, and resolution to all fit within the 6-minute runtime, with all of the scripts following the same predictable formula. A threat emerges. Aquaman and Aqualad respond. They win with minimal struggle. Cue corny joke. And they swim away to Atlantis. That is it. They also relied on exposition-heavy dialogue to move the plots forward, leaving, well, little room for nuanced interaction or character growth, with the characters frequently announcing what's happening on screen, and dialogue that is just overly simplistic, packed with corny one-liners that only the 60s can produce.
I'm talking about the 60s, man!
Characters often lacked any development at all or complexity, with Aquaman as the stoic hero, Aqualad as the enthusiastic sidekick, and the villains being, well, all one-dimensional at best. But with all of its lack of narrative depth, shall we say, it does make it more accessible for a wider range of younger viewers, which, let's face it, that's who they were going for. But it does limit the cartoon's, shall we say, enjoyment and rewatchability for older viewers.
That's perfect for the kids.
Look, the cartoon itself did a great job in its stories to introduce the range of characters that they had to that broader audience, helping to solidify Aquaman's place in pop culture with its imaginative underwater settings, action-packed sequences, and a nice light-hearted tone, making it a hit with the children of the late 60s. However, compared to the Adventures of Superman cartoon, this feels more repetitive and predictable than its co-headliner, but does win you over with some of its nostalgic charm, that is for sure. And for that, I'm going to give this a 15 out of 30. Now, the show is completely based all of its characters off what was actually in the comic books at that time during the 60s, with Aquaman, Aqualad, and Mera being almost identical in the show as they were in the comic books, but with just a couple of small differences. One being Aquaman's costume, whereas in the cartoon, he's got black boots. Yep. Whereas in everything else you ever see him in, comic books, media, anything, he just has green leggings with no boots whatsoever. This is the only time you ever see him with black boots. Also, for Aquaman, there was his weakness, where he could only be out of the water for about an hour or so before he would slowly die. But that slowly changed over time because it didn't really work. So they finally removed it from his continuity back in 2011 and established that he actually grew up on land before learning of his Atlantean heritage. Now, the majority of the villains in this show were made for this show, except for a couple of notable exceptions, and those being Black Manta, the Fisherman, and Torpedo Man, who were all from the comics initially. And one big difference I noticed was Mera. Now, don't get me wrong, she looked exactly like she did in the comics, that's right, but her character was reduced to just a damsel in distress for Aquaman to just come along and save, as opposed to her formidable hero that she was in the actual comic books. And look, that was disappointing to see, but look, it was a big reflection of how things were done at that time in the 60s.
A whole damsel in distress routine.
Now the cast, I will bring up here. And as you can see, not too many here at all. But this is the old Filmation do it on a budget style here. So now if we have a look at them, we'll start with our main star, and that is Marvin Miller as Aquaman, who by all accounts was a very seasoned voice actor, known for his deep, commanding voice, which, look, it really helped solidify Aquaman's heroic persona and status as King of the Seven Seas. And then we have Jerry Dexter as Aqualad, who brought this youthful and energetic voice perfectly suited to fit the eager teenage sidekick role, which his enthusiasm and a light-hearted tone that would have really appealed to those younger viewers who could have really identified themselves with that character. Then we have Diana Maddox as Mera and Queen Vassa. Look, she did a great job, but however, her limited screen time and dialogue left little room for either of her characters to really shine, unfortunately. But last but not least, we have Ted Knight, who pretty much did every bloody thing else.
There is nothing he can't do.
Ted, being a jack of all trades, did a great job on the rest of the characters as usual, being one of those Filmation standards for that time. So look, all of the cast did a very good job here, and I was pretty impressed with that. So with that, I'm going to give it an 18 out of 20. Okay, as we look at the case, look, it looks beautiful. Look at that, that is spectacular. There is the side. Here is the back, some great artwork. The only problem is it's in one of these terrible cardboard cases. I really don't like this. Now, as I found out, I was putting them in wrong. I was putting them in this way. Turns out you have to put them in that way, which I found out later. But yeah, a lot better. Now, look at that. That looks stellar. That looks awesome. The artwork on these is fantastic. And there is the insides, as you can see, the disc and thing. Look, overall, the artwork is great on them. The effort they put into these is fantastic. The unfortunate thing is, it's just in these terrible cardboard cases, which, as you can see by mine, it's burred up already, and it's barely touched or been moved, and it's already wearing down. You can get a plastic case one. They brought out a release a little bit later in a hard plastic case. Bit of an upgraded version. I'm not sure if I'm going to go that way. I'm hoping they bring it out on Blu-ray eventually, and then I'll upgrade it then. But for the time being, I've got this and I'm reviewing this one. So other than the fact that it's in the cardboard case is what's going to get the mark down, but for me, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. So look, there is just one special feature on here, and that is Aquaman, Sovereign of the Seas. Look, it goes for about 26 minutes, and it features interviews with all the usual talking heads that DC rolls out for these retrospectives, as they talk about his evolution of the character through history and discuss all these interpretations on screen over the years, from cartoon to live action. So look, if you love that type of thing, like I do, definitely worth a watch. Great watch to see just a bit of the backstory of the character. I always love that type of stuff. So if you're into that, definitely check it out. And with that, because it's actually half decent, I am going to give this a 6 out of 10. As I bring up the Rotten Tomatoes scorecard, as you can see, the critics came in at 0%, while the audience was 0%. No score. Okay, not really surprising there, but that, you know what that means? Of course it does. Off to IMDb, and what do they have? Ooh, 6.6 out of 10. As usual with any of these type of cartoons, it's all about the nostalgic fans who rave about it when they were a kid, or you have the people who never watched it as a kid watching it now, comparing it with today's cartoons and going, yeah, it's not that great. So look, not a real surprise with that score, but for myself, I do think it's a little higher than it should be, but it is what it is. So look, if we round it out, we get a score of 7 out of 10. So look, for me, I did see this occasional episode back in the day in the 80s, from around the time when the Super Friends were on TV, as they were obviously trying to capitalize on that. So I did know of the cartoon, but I didn't know it real well. And it was great to watch it again and revisit the show. As I did honestly enjoy watching it, but I have to say, watching it the way I do, which is usually in a big binge session of, I nearly watched the whole 38 episodes in a row, it does highlight the very repetitive nature of the show. But unlike The Adventures of Superman that I reviewed a few months back, go check that out.
Talk about self-promotion.
Even though Superman was repetitive in the same nature as Aquaman, it just managed to be more interesting, as I felt it came down to how the writers used Superman's powers, sort of changing things up with how he solved problems, because he had more powers, he could do things differently, so it made it interesting. Whereas Aquaman, he seemed very limited on the superpowers ability front, as the writers really fell back on just one of his powers, and that was the ability to talk to marine life, to solve literally all his problems, rather than some of his actual superpowers he had in the comic books, which kind of started to make the show feel like Aquaman really didn't do much as a hero. He was more of a guy that could convince everyone else to do his job for him.
That's just lazy writing.
One thing I noticed as well was Aquaman loved to call Aqualad by nicknames all the time, like Minnow and Tadpole, etc., which was different. And then Aqualad called Aquaman Big Daddy sometimes, which, ooh, that just felt weird. Maybe they should have called the show Big Daddy and Tadpole.
Right, Tadpole?
Check, Big Daddy.
Anyway, it was the 60s.
Look, it was a different time.
Look, so for me, this was a nice walk down memory lane. There's no two ways about it. But watching this, it's kind of got me realizing that there's not a real lot of rewatch value here for me, or for anyone of any sort of that older generation. But look, it was good, but yeah, the repetitive nature is what lets it down. So for that, I'm going to go with 13 out of 20. For availability, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. It's very much middle of the range. It's not hard to find a copy on eBay or on Amazon, but you will have the choice. There is the hard, like I said, there is the hard version and the cardboard version out there. Collectability, I'm going to put this at a 4 out of 5. This is one of those classic ones, classic cartoons that you need to have in your collection. It's a great item to have if you're a DC collector, you love your Aquaman, or even just a comic book fan in general. It's definitely one to have in the collection. The average price you are looking at is somewhere between the $50 to $75 mark for DVD, and that is for either version, the hard plastic case or the cardboard case. Now, if we tally up the scores, we get a grand total of 65 out of 100. Wow, that is not a bad score for a great 60s cartoon like Aquaman. Full of nostalgia, that's for sure. Definitely one to get your hands on and get in your collection. Let's hope they give it the Blu-ray treatment like they have for the Batman cartoons recently. Here's hoping.
At this point, all I have left is hope.
Hey, if you like this video and you want to see some more of my reviews, why don't you click that one there? Maybe you want to see some of my collection updates. Got you covered too. Click that one there. And of course, don't forget to do the most important thing. Throw me a like and don't forget to hit that subscription button on the way out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.